Welcome back to the Whispering Past. We appreciate you and look forward to our time together. Please drop a comment and let us know where you're listening or viewing from and what time you generally go to bed. It's fascinating to find a little bit about you. And if you enjoy what we do, please press the like button and consider subscribing. Now on to our story. Close your eyes for a moment and let me guide you to a place where time moves differently. Picture yourself standing at the edge of a perfectly still courtyard in the medieval Japan. The air is cool and carries the faint scent of moss and morning dew. Before you lies a garden unlike any you've ever seen. No flowers bloom here. No trees provide shade. Instead, pristine white gravel stretches before you like a miniature sea, its surface marked with perfectly parallel lines that seem to flow like gentle waves frozen in time. This is the world of Karensansui, the ancient Japanese art of dry landscape gardening. Here, in this sacred space, every grain of sand has been carefully considered, every stone deliberately placed. The monk who tends this garden has just finished his morning ritual, the wooden rake still warm in his weathered hands. The patterns he's created tell stories older than memory itself, stories of mountains that touch the sky, of oceans that stretch beyond the horizon, of islands where enlightenment waits patiently for those who seek it. As you step closer, your feet sink slightly into the carefully arranged gravel. Each step creates the softest crunch, a sound that seems to whisper ancient secrets. The stones before you aren't merely decorative. They are mountains rising from a paper-smooth sea. Their surfaces covered in the most delicate velvet moss that took decades to establish. Some stones stand alone like solitary peaks, while others cluster together in silent conversation, their placement following rules that speak to something deeper than mere aesthetics. This is the profound simplicity of Zen made manifest in earth and stone. In the 8th century, when Buddhism first took root in Japanese soil, monks began creating these gardens as spaces for contemplation and meditation. Unlike the elaborate gardens of the imperial court, with their cherry blossoms and ornamental ponds, these dry landscapes embrace the Buddhist principle of mu, the beauty found in emptiness, in what is not there rather than what is. The art of Karensansui emerged from the deep understanding that nature's greatest teachings often come not from its abundance, but from its restraint. The Japanese monks who perfected this art form understood that by removing the distractions of color and seasonal change, they could create something timeless, a landscape that would look the same whether viewed in spring's gentle awakening or winter's quiet reflection. Watch as the morning light shifts across the garden surface. The raked patterns seem to breathe with the changing shadows, creating the illusion of movement where none exists. This is not mere artistry. It is meditation made visible. Each line drawn in the gravel represents countless hours of quiet contemplation, of minds slowly emptying themselves of worldly concerns to make room for deeper understanding. The stones that punctuate this miniature seascape were chosen with the same care a master calligrapher selects his brush. Some were quarried from sacred mountains, their surfaces bearing the marks of centuries of wind and weather. Others were gathered from riverbeds, smoothed by countless years of flowing water, until they achieved the perfect balance of roughness and smoothness that speaks to the Buddhist concept of impermanence. In the world of Karensansui, every element serves a purpose beyond decoration. The white gravel, often made from crushed granite or white sand, represents water in all its forms. Sometimes the gentle lapping of waves against a shore, sometimes the vast expanse of an ocean that stretches beyond the horizon. The act of raking this gravel into perfect parallel lines is itself a form of meditation, a daily ritual that connects the gardener to the eternal rhythms of nature. As you stand in this sacred space, you begin to understand why these gardens have captivated souls for over 1,000 years. Here, in this carefully orchestrated simplicity, the mind naturally begins to settle. The constant chatter of daily life fades away, replaced by something far more profound. The recognition that beauty doesn't require complexity, that peace can be found in the most minimal of expressions. The monks who created these gardens understood that the human spirit, like the raked gravel before you, needs tending. Just as the garden requires daily attention to maintain its perfect patterns, so too does the soul require moments of stillness to maintain its equilibrium. In this place where less truly becomes more, where empty spaces speak louder than filled ones, you begin to glimpse the wisdom that has drawn seekers to these quiet courtyards for centuries. The beauty of Karensansui lies not just in what you see, but in what you feel. As the morning progresses and the light shifts across the garden surface, new patterns emerge in the interplay of shadow and texture. This is a landscape designed to reward patient observation, to reveal its secrets only to those willing to slow down and truly see. Let yourself truly enter this sacred space now. As you take your first steps into the garden, feel the cool gravel beneath your feet. Each stone is perfectly sized, not so large as to cause discomfort, not so small as to scatter carelessly. The monks who laid this foundation understood that the body's connection to the garden is as important as the mind's contemplation of it. Your feet sink slightly with each step, creating the most satisfying sensation as thousands of tiny stones shift and settle around you. The sound of your movement is like a gentle percussion, soft, rhythmic, almost musical. In the early morning stillness, even this subtle noise seems amplified, yet rather than disturbing the peace, it becomes part of the garden's natural symphony. You notice how the sound changes as you move from the freshly raked sections to areas where the gravel has settled deeper, where generations of quiet visitors have walked this same contemplative path. Kneel down and let your fingers trail through the cool stones. Each piece of gravel tells its own quiet story, some angular and sharp from recent breaking, others worn smooth by countless seasons of rain and snow. The monastery's records speak of gardens where the same stones have been tended for 300 years or more, gradually transformed by weather and human touch into something approaching perfection. Here, in your hands, is the physical manifestation of patience itself. The coolness of the stones travels up through your palms, grounding you in this moment, in this place that exists somehow outside the rushing current of ordinary time. This tactile connection to the garden is deliberate. The medieval monks who perfected Karensansui understood that enlightenment comes not just through the mind, but through the body's complete immersion in sacred space. Rise slowly and approach the moss-covered stones that punctuate this mineral sea. Here is where the garden reveals one of its most profound secrets: the cultivation of stillness through the marriage of the ancient and the living. The moss that blankets these stones didn't appear overnight. It represents decades of patient cultivation, of monks who understood that true beauty requires not just vision, but the willingness to tend something greater than oneself across generations. Touch the moss gently with your fingertips. Feel its velvety softness, cool and slightly damp with morning dew. This moss has witnessed seasons beyond counting, has felt the weight of snow in winter and the gentle caress of spring rain. In its quiet persistence, it embodies the Buddhist teaching of constancy amid change, forever growing, forever adapting, yet always maintaining its essential nature. The arrangement of stones follows principles that speak to something deeper than conscious design. These are not random placements, but compositions that follow the ancient Japanese aesthetic concept of ma, the power of empty space, the profound meaning found in what is deliberately left unsaid, unplaced, unfilled. Between each stone grouping lies a vast expanse of raked gravel that serves not as mere background, but as an essential element of the composition. As you continue to drift deeper into this quiet historical moment, remember, if these gentle journeys bring you peace, consider liking this video and subscribing in the morning. Your support helps us create more paths to peaceful sleep. This interplay between solid and void, between the weight of stone and the lightness of swept gravel, creates a visual rhythm that resonates with something primal in human perception. The medieval Japanese understood that the eye needs rest just as much as it needs stimulation, that beauty often lies not in abundance, but in the careful curation of essential elements. Walk the perimeter of the garden now, observing how the view changes with each step. From one angle, the stones appear to cluster together like a family of islands. From another, they seem to march across the gravel sea in stately procession. This shifting perspective is no accident. Karensansui gardens are designed to reveal new compositions with each vantage point, rewarding the patient observer with an ever-changing yet eternally stable landscape. The raked patterns themselves deserve quiet contemplation. Each line represents not just aesthetic choice, but hours of meditative practice. The monks who maintain these gardens often speak of the raking as their primary form of meditation. The repetitive motion of the wooden rake creating patterns that mirror the mind's journey toward clarity. In some monasteries, the same monk tends the same garden for decades, developing an intimate relationship with every stone, every subtle variation in the gravel's texture. Watch how the light plays across these carefully drawn lines. As the sun climbs higher, shadows shorten and patterns that were invisible in the dawn light suddenly emerge with startling clarity. The garden is constantly changing, yet always fundamentally the same. A paradox that lies at the heart of Buddhist understanding. The tools of this ancient art are as simple as the gardens themselves. The wooden rake, crafted from bamboo or hinoki cypress, becomes an extension of the gardener's own being. Its handle, worn smooth by decades of use, fits perfectly in weathered hands that have learned to read the gravel's mood, to understand exactly how much pressure creates the perfect line, the perfect depth, the perfect expression of flowing water frozen in mineral form. Settle now into this space of profound quietude. Find a comfortable position on the weathered wooden platform that edges the garden. Smooth planks worn by countless visitors who have come here seeking what you seek now. A respite from the endless chatter of the world. A doorway into the deeper chambers of the soul. The wood beneath you is warm from the morning sun, solid and reassuring, connecting you to this earth while your spirit prepares to wander among these miniature mountains and valleys. As you gaze across this carefully composed landscape, allow your breathing to naturally slow and deepen. The garden seems to breathe with you, its raked patterns rising and falling like a gentle tide. This is the magic of Karensansui, It transforms the viewer into a participant in an ancient dialogue between human consciousness and the eternal patterns of nature. Here, in this sacred geometry of stone and sand, your mind begins its journey toward that most precious of states, true stillness. The stones before you seem to pulse with quiet life. Medieval monks believed that rocks possess their own form of consciousness, not the quick, chattering awareness of human minds, but something deeper, more patient, more enduring. These stones have weathered centuries of seasons, have absorbed the prayers and meditations of countless seekers. In their silent presence, you begin to understand why the Japanese developed the concept of mono-no aware, the bittersweet awareness of the impermanence of all things, and the profound beauty that emerges from accepting this truth. Let your gaze rest on the largest stone grouping, positioned slightly off-center in accordance with the ancient principle of asymmetrical balance. This arrangement, which might seem random to the untrained eye, follows rules as precise as any mathematical formula. The monks who placed these stones understood that perfect symmetry belongs to the realm of human artifice, while true beauty emerges from the subtle irregularities found in nature itself. Watch how the moss clings to the northern faces of the stones, seeking the cooler, more humid microclimates that allow it to flourish. This moss represents one of the garden's most profound teachings, that beauty and growth often occur in the shadowed places, in the quiet corners where the world's harsh light cannot penetrate. The medieval gardeners who cultivated these tiny ecosystems understood that enlightenment, like moss, requires patience, humidity, and the willingness to thrive in conditions that might seem inhospitable to more demanding forms of life. The patterns in the gravel tell stories that change with each passing hour. In the early morning, when the light strikes from the east, the furrows catch shadows that create the illusion of actual water flowing between the stones. By midday, when the sun climbs directly overhead, these same patterns flatten into abstract geometries that speak to the mind's deeper hunger for order and meaning. And now, as the light begins its afternoon journey toward the west, new configurations emerge. Mountain ranges viewed from impossible heights, aerial perspectives of rivers meandering through valleys that exist only in the realm of contemplation. This is the garden's greatest gift, its ability to exist simultaneously in multiple dimensions of meaning. On one level, it is simply an arrangement of stones and gravel, an aesthetic composition designed to please the eye. On another level, it becomes a map of the interior landscape, a guide to the territories of the soul that can only be explored in moments of profound stillness. The medieval monks who perfected this art understood that the external world and the internal world are not separate realms, but different expressions of the same underlying reality. As you continue to contemplate this miniature cosmos, notice how your sense of scale begins to shift. The small stones transform into towering peaks, the raked gravel becomes vast oceans, and you find yourself traveling through landscapes that exist both within the confines of this small courtyard and in the boundless realm of imagination. This is the phenomenon the Japanese call borrowed scenery, the ability of a small, carefully composed space to evoke the grandeur of the natural world through the power of suggestion and the viewer's own contemplative participation. The afternoon light grows softer now, casting longer shadows that seem to breathe life into the static composition. Each grain of sand becomes a tiny mirror, reflecting fragments of sky and cloud. In this moment, you begin to understand one of Zen's most profound teachings. that enlightenment is not something to be achieved in some distant future, but something to be discovered in the immediate present, in the simple act of paying complete attention to what is directly before you. The monks who created these gardens spoke of achieving no mind, a state of consciousness in which the endless stream of thoughts, worries, and desires that normally occupy our awareness simply settles into stillness. Here, surrounded by this carefully orchestrated simplicity, you can feel your own mental chatter beginning to quiet. The urgent concerns that seemed so important just moments ago fade into the background, replaced by a growing sense of spaciousness, of connection to something larger and more enduring than your individual worries. This is the true purpose of Karensansui, not merely to create beautiful spaces, but to create openings in the fabric of ordinary consciousness, doorways through which the soul can glimpse its own essential nature. In the profound simplicity of stone and sand, in the careful balance of fullness and emptiness, in the eternal dance between permanence and change, you find reflected the deepest truths about the nature of existence itself. In the growing stillness of this sacred afternoon, let your attention drift to what might seem like the least significant aspect of the garden, the empty spaces. Here, between the carefully placed stones, in the vast expanses of raked gravel that stretch like calm seas, lies one of Buddhism's most profound teachings. The Japanese have a word for this, ku, meaning emptiness or void. But this is not the emptiness of absence or lack. It is the emptiness that contains all possibilities, the pregnant silence from which all sounds emerge, the blank canvas upon which all art finds its meaning. The medieval monks who perfected Karensansui understood that the human mind, like the garden itself, functions best when there is space for contemplation. In our daily lives, we fill every moment with activity, every silence with noise, every pause with distraction. But here, in these carefully cultivated expanses of simplicity, you discover that emptiness is not something to be feared or filled, but something to be celebrated and inhabited. Notice how the raked patterns seem to extend beyond the physical boundaries of the garden. This illusion is carefully cultivated. The lines draw the eye outward, suggesting infinite space contained within finite borders. This is another fundamental principle of Japanese aesthetics, the ability to evoke the boundless within the bounded, the eternal within the temporal. As you follow these lines with your gaze, you find yourself traveling not just across gravel, but across the landscapes of memory and possibility. The afternoon light has softened to that particular golden quality that photographers call the magic hour, when harsh shadows give way to gentle gradations of tone and color. In this light, the garden reveals yet another aspect of its carefully constructed mystery. The stones seem to glow from within, their moss coverings taking on an almost luminescent quality. The white gravel becomes a sea of tiny mirrors, each grain reflecting the vast sky above. This is the hour when the garden keepers traditionally perform their final grooming of the day. In monasteries across Japan, elderly monks emerge with their wooden rakes to restore the patterns that the day's contemplation may have disturbed. But this restoration is not mere maintenance. It is a ritual as sacred as any prayer, a daily renewal of the commitment to order and beauty that has sustained these gardens for over a millennium. Watch now, as imaginary footsteps move across the gravel, perhaps those of a monk from centuries past, making his evening rounds. His feet create small disturbances in the perfect patterns, temporary imperfections that will be smoothed away with tomorrow's raking. This cycle of disturbance and restoration speaks to one of Buddhism's central insights, that impermanence is not a flaw in the fabric of existence, but its very essence. Everything that arises will pass away, and in this passing lies the poignant beauty of all phenomena. The stones themselves seem to settle deeper into their contemplative silence as evening approaches. Each grouping tells its own quiet story. Here, 3 stones arranged to suggest a family of mountains reflected in still water. There, a single monolithic presence that speaks of solitary peaks, reaching toward enlightenment. The medieval gardeners who placed these stones followed principles passed down through generations of masters, each placement requiring not just aesthetic judgment, but deep understanding of the spiritual meanings embedded in natural forms. In the Buddhist tradition, mountains are not merely geological formations, but sacred spaces where earth meets sky, where the material and spiritual realms intersect. The stones in this garden serve as proxies for these holy peaks, allowing contemplatives to undertake spiritual journeys without leaving the monastery grounds. As you gaze upon these miniature mountains, you participate in a form of pilgrimage that has been practiced for over 12 centuries. The garden exists in perfect harmony with its architectural surroundings. The wooden buildings that frame it, with their clean lines, natural materials, and emphasis on horizontal rather than vertical elements, serve not as boundaries, but as extensions of the garden's aesthetic philosophy. This integration of architecture and landscape reflects the Japanese understanding that human-made and natural beauty need not be in opposition, but can work together to create environments that nourish both body and spirit. As the day continues its gentle decline toward evening, the garden reveals new subtleties of form and meaning. Shadows that were sharp at midday now blur into soft gradations. The temperature difference between sunlit gravel and shaded moss creates tiny air currents that seem to make the garden breathe. This is living architecture, not static display, but dynamic ecosystem, constantly changing, yet eternally constant in its essential nature. The raking patterns, viewed in this changing light, reveal their sophisticated understanding of optical illusion and psychological effect. The parallel lines create a sense of movement and flow, while the spaces between stone groupings provide visual rest. This careful balance between stimulation and calm mirrors the garden's spiritual function, to engage the mind just enough to hold attention, while providing sufficient tranquility to allow deeper contemplation to emerge. Here, in this masterpiece of controlled simplicity, you begin to understand why these gardens have served as gateways to enlightenment for so many centuries. They offer not escape from the world, but a clarified vision of it, a way of seeing that recognizes the sacred geometry underlying all natural phenomena, the profound order that emerges when human intention aligns itself with the deeper patterns of existence. As evening light continues to soften across the garden, imagine how this same space transforms through the endless cycle of seasons. Unlike gardens that depend on flowering plants for their beauty, Karensansui reveals different faces of itself as the year turns, each season bringing its own subtle revelations. In winter, when snow settles like silk scarves across the dark stones, the garden achieves an almost supernatural purity. The white gravel disappears beneath the snow, creating a unified field of pristine whiteness, broken only by the dark, moss-covered peaks that emerge like ancient islands from a frozen sea. The medieval monks who tended these gardens through countless winters understood that this seasonal transformation was not an interruption of the garden's purpose, but its fulfillment. In the depth of winter, when all of nature retreats into dormancy, the garden's essential structure becomes most visible. Stripped of any decorative elements, revealed in stark simplicity, it speaks most clearly to the soul seeking clarity and peace. Spring arrives with the gentlest whisper, not in explosions of cherry blossoms or cascades of flowering vines, but in the subtle greening of moss, the gradual warming of stone surfaces, the barely perceptible shift in the quality of light that filters through the garden. This is beauty without announcement, transformation without drama. The garden teaches patience even in renewal, showing that the most profound changes often occur so gradually as to be almost invisible to the casual observer. Watch as tiny droplets of morning dew collect on the moss surfaces, each drop a perfect lens that contains the entire garden in miniature. This phenomenon, the infinite reflected in the infinitesimal, captures something essential about the Buddhist understanding of reality. Every grain of sand contains the pattern of the whole. Every moment of contemplation opens into timelessness. Every breath connects the individual consciousness to the universal breath that sustains all life. The raking patterns, too, respond to seasonal rhythms. In spring, when frequent rains soften the gravel, the lines blur and merge, creating organic flowing forms that mirror the season's gentle energy. Summer brings stability. The patterns hold their crisp edges longer, reflecting the season's clarity and strength. Autumn sees the accumulation of fallen leaves, creating temporary compositions as beautiful and ephemeral as the season itself. Each leaf that falls becomes part of the garden's ongoing meditation on impermanence, a natural mandala that will be swept away with the next raking, leaving only memory and the promise of next year's repetition. This acceptance of seasonal change reflects one of Zen's deepest teachings, that resistance to the natural flow of transformation is the root of suffering. The garden demonstrates this principle not through philosophical argument, but through lived example, showing how beauty can be found in every phase of existence when we align ourselves with, rather than oppose, the fundamental rhythms of life. The stone arrangements reveal different aspects of themselves as the seasons progress. In summer's strong light, they appear solid and permanent, casting sharp shadows that emphasize their sculptural presence. In autumn's softer illumination, they seem to glow from within, their surfaces warmed by the season's golden light. Winter transforms them into abstract forms emerging from snow, while spring reveals the delicate tracery of moss and lichen that has grown during the dormant months. This seasonal transformation speaks to the garden's role as a living teacher. Unlike static works of art that present the same face to every viewer, Karensansui garden offer different lessons depending on when and how they are encountered. The monk who visits in winter's depths receives teachings about endurance and essential structure. The contemplative who comes in spring's awakening learns about renewal and gentle growth. Each season offers its own doorway into understanding. The garden keepers maintain detailed records of these seasonal changes, noting how moss growth patterns shift from year to year, how the settling of stones creates subtle alterations in the overall composition, how the accumulation of organic matter gradually enriches the soil beneath the gravel. These observations become part of the monastery's living archive, a record of contemplation stretching back centuries that demonstrates the garden's role as both artistic creation and scientific study. In some of Japan's oldest temple gardens, monks have maintained the same raking patterns for over 400 years, passing the knowledge from master to student in an unbroken chain of contemplative practice. The wooden rakes, where smooth, are replaced where smooth again. The stones settle deeper into their beds, developing patinas that can only be achieved through centuries of patient weathering. The moss communities evolve and adapt, creating microclimates of incredible complexity within the garden's apparent simplicity. This temporal depth adds another dimension to the garden's power to induce peace. When you sit in contemplation here, you join a conversation that has been ongoing for centuries. Your breath mingles with the breath of countless previous visitors. Your moment of stillness becomes part of an ongoing meditation that transcends individual lifespans, connecting you to the great chain of seekers who have found solace in these arrangements of stone and sand. The evening light continues to deepen, creating ever more subtle gradations of shadow and illumination across the garden surface. Each passing moment brings new configurations of light and form, yet the essential nature of the space remains constant. This paradox, constant change within unchanging essence, lies at the heart of the garden's teaching power and its ability to guide visitors toward the deepest forms of rest and renewal. As the day settles into its quieter rhythms, imagine the daily life that unfolds around this sacred space. Since before dawn, the garden has been witness to the monastery's gentle routines. The first monk to visit arrives in the pre-dawn darkness, his footsteps silent on the wooden walkway as he performs the ritual morning observation. This is not mere maintenance, but a form of prayer, a daily communion with the forces of impermanence that shape all existence. In the deep stillness before sunrise, when the garden exists in a realm between night and day, its essential nature becomes most apparent. The stones emerge from shadow like thoughts emerging from the unconscious mind. The raked patterns, invisible in the darkness, gradually reveal themselves as the first light touches their carefully crafted ridges and valleys. This daily rebirth mirrors the spiritual journey itself, the gradual awakening from the sleep of ordinary consciousness into the clarity of enlightened awareness. The morning raking ceremony begins in silence. The elderly monk who serves as head gardener approaches with the same wooden rake his predecessor used, and his predecessor before him. The tool has been worn smooth by countless hands, its bamboo tines shaped by decades of patient use. This continuity of practice creates a living link between past and present, transforming the simple act of drawing lines in gravel into a form of ancestor worship, a way of honoring all those who have maintained this sacred space. Each stroke of the rake is deliberate, meditative. The monk's breathing synchronizes with his movements, creating a rhythm that matches the deeper pulses of natural life. This is not work in the ordinary sense, but a form of kinetic meditation, a way of using the body's movements to quiet the restless mind. The parallel lines that emerge under his careful attention are not merely decorative, but expressions of inner order made manifest in the physical world. As the morning progresses, other members of the monastic community make their quiet visits to the garden. Each approaches in silence, removes their wooden sandals, and settles into contemplation. The garden accommodates multiple visitors without crowding. Its design creates natural viewing positions that offer different perspectives while maintaining the sense of individual solitude essential to deep reflection. A young novice monk, perhaps in his first year of training, struggles to quiet his restless mind. His eyes dart from stone to stone, seeking something to grasp, some object on which to focus his scattered attention. But gradually, under the garden's patient influence, his gaze settles, his breathing deepens. The urgent thoughts that drove him here begin to subside, replaced by something more spacious, more peaceful. This transformation happens countless times each day, as the garden works its gentle magic on minds seeking refuge from the world's relentless demands. The midday hours bring different qualities of light and contemplation. When the sun reaches its zenith, shadows disappear, and the garden achieves a kind of democratic illumination. Every stone, every grain of gravel receives equal attention from the light. This even illumination creates a sense of timelessness, as if the garden exists in an eternal noon where nothing is hidden, nothing is emphasized above anything else. In this light, the garden's teaching about equality and interconnectedness becomes most apparent. An elderly monk, bent with age and decades of contemplative practice, makes his slow way to his favorite viewing spot. His movements are deliberate, economical. Each gesture, the result of years of training in mindfulness. He settles onto a worn cushion that has supported him through thousands of hours of meditation. His presence in the garden is so quiet, so still, that birds land on the gravel nearby, unafraid of this human who has learned to inhabit space without dominating it. The afternoon brings a different rhythm to the garden's life. As the light begins its slow journey toward evening, the space seems to exhale, releasing the intensity of midday contemplation into something softer, more receptive. This is the time when the garden's therapeutic qualities become most apparent. Visitors arrive carrying the weight of daily concerns, administrative duties, interpersonal conflicts, spiritual doubts, and find these burdens gradually dissolving in the face of the garden's imperturbable peace. The stones seem to absorb human anxiety, transforming it through their patient presence into something more manageable, more spacious. This is not mere imagination, but observable phenomenon. The garden's carefully calibrated proportions, its strategic use of empty space, its subtle deployment of natural elements, all work together to create an environment that actively promotes psychological and spiritual healing. As evening approaches, the garden's daily cycle begins to complete itself. The head gardener returns for his evening inspection, noting any disturbances that need attention, any leaves that have fallen onto the raked patterns. But these observations are made without attachment, without urgency. The garden teaches acceptance of imperfection, as well as the importance of renewal. What is disturbed today will be restored tomorrow. This daily cycle of disturbance and restoration becomes a metaphor for the spiritual life itself, the endless process of losing clarity and regaining it, of falling into confusion and returning to understanding. The evening light transforms the garden one final time, casting long shadows that emphasize the sculptural qualities of the stone arrangements. In this light, the garden reveals its kinship with all of nature's daily rhythms, the rising and setting of sun, the breathing of wind, the eternal pulse of seasons. Here, in this carefully constructed microcosm, the eternal patterns that govern all existence become visible, tangible, available for direct contemplation and absorption into the depths of the seeking soul. As twilight deepens around this sacred space, the garden begins its transformation into something even more profound, a doorway between the visible and invisible worlds, between the realm of ordinary consciousness and the deeper territories of the spirit. In this liminal hour, when day surrenders to night, the carefully arranged stones and meticulously raked gravel become more than aesthetic elements. They become symbols in the truest sense, bridges between the material and spiritual dimensions of existence. The medieval Zen masters who perfected Karensansui understood that the human psyche responds to certain universal patterns, archetypal forms that speak directly to the unconscious mind. The circular arrangements of stones evoke the mandala, that ancient symbol of wholeness and integration found in spiritual traditions across the world. The flowing lines of raked gravel mirror the meandering patterns of thought itself, the way consciousness moves when freed from the rigid channels of conceptual thinking. Settle deeper into this contemplative space now, allowing your awareness to expand beyond the boundaries of individual identity. This is what the garden ultimately offers, not escape from the self, but a gentle expansion of self-understanding that encompasses ever wider circles of being. The stones before you are not separate from you. They are expressions of the same fundamental reality that manifests as your own consciousness. The patterns in the gravel are not different from the patterns of your own thought. They are the same organizing principles made visible in mineral form. This recognition that the observer and the observed are not separate entities, but different aspects of a single, unified field of awareness, lies at the heart of Zen enlightenment. The garden serves as a kind of mirror, reflecting back to you your own essential nature, when that nature is freed from the distortions of ego and desire. In the profound stillness that settles over the space as night approaches, you begin to glimpse what the mystics have always known, that consciousness is not produced by the brain, but is the fundamental fabric of reality itself. The therapeutic power of Karensansui gardens lies precisely in their ability to induce this expanded state of awareness without effort or strain. Unlike meditation practices that require years of training to master, the garden works its transformation simply through patient observation. The carefully calculated proportions, the strategic placement of elements, the subtle interplay of mass and void, all of these work together to create an environment that naturally promotes the brain states associated with deep relaxation and spiritual insight. Modern neuroscience has begun to understand what the medieval monks intuited, that certain visual patterns and spatial relationships can directly influence consciousness, promoting the production of brainwaves associated with calm alertness and creative insight. The garden becomes a kind of external technology for inner transformation, a precisely calibrated instrument designed to tune the human psyche to its optimal frequency. The stones seem to pulse with their own slow rhythm now, not the quick heartbeat of biological life, but something deeper, more fundamental. This is geological time, the vast patience of mineral existence that measures change in millennia rather than moments. By attuning your awareness to this slower rhythm, you begin to participate in a different kind of time, sacred time, mythic time, the eternal now that underlies all temporal experience. The raked patterns, now barely visible in the gathering darkness, continue to exert their subtle influence on perception. Even when not consciously observed, these carefully drawn lines continue to organize visual experience at the subliminal level, creating a sense of order and flow that promotes psychological integration. This is one of the garden's most sophisticated teachings. that harmony can be achieved not through force or effort, but through the gentle influence of well-ordered environments on the naturally self-organizing capacities of consciousness. In the monastery tradition, this evening hour is considered especially conducive to breakthrough insights. When the busyness of the day has settled and the mind has been softened by hours of contemplation, new understandings often emerge spontaneously. The garden serves as a catalyst for these moments of recognition. Its perfectly balanced composition, creating the optimal conditions for the kind of non-linear knowing that characterizes spiritual insight. The moss-covered surfaces of the stones retain warmth from the day's sun, creating tiny microclimates that seem to breathe with life. This interplay between the living and non-living elements of the garden mirrors one of Buddhism's most profound teachings, that the boundary between animate and inanimate is ultimately arbitrary, that consciousness permeates all phenomena at the deepest level. In the garden's carefully orchestrated ecosystem, every element participates in the same unified field of being. As night continues to deepen around this sacred space, you find yourself becoming part of the garden's own meditation. Your breathing synchronizes with its subtle rhythms. Your awareness expands to encompass its carefully defined boundaries. In this moment of complete integration between observer and observed, you taste something of the liberation that these gardens were designed to facilitate. The recognition that peace is not something to be achieved, but something to be recognized as your own deepest nature. And so, we find ourselves, at the close of day, in this garden of infinite possibility. Your breathing has slowed, naturally, effortlessly, matching the ancient rhythm of this place. The garden holds you now, as it has held countless visitors before, as it will hold countless more to come. Let yourself sink deeper into this moment of perfect stillness. The boundaries between your body and the garden are dissolving gently, naturally. You are becoming part of the pattern, part of the eternal design that connects all things. The monks who first raked these stones centuries ago, they too felt this peace. This same tranquility that flows through you now has flowed through human hearts. For over 1,000 years, you are connected to this unbroken chain of contemplation, of wonder, of rest. Your eyelids are growing heavy, as natural as the evening shadows, lengthening across the garden. There is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to go. The garden watches over you, protects your rest, holds space for your dreams. In your mind's eye, you can see yourself, lying peacefully among the soft moss, your body supported by the ancient earth. Your breath moves in perfect harmony with the garden's eternal rhythm, in and out, slower and slower, each exhale releasing all tension, all worry, all need to be anywhere. But here, the garden whispers its final teaching. As you drift towards sleep, that peace is not something to be found. It is something to be remembered. It lives within you, always, waiting, like these stones, for your return. Rest now, in the garden's embrace. Let the ancient stones hold your dreams. Let the raked patterns guide your thoughts toward perfect stillness. The garden will be here when you wake, unchanged, eternal, waiting to offer its gifts of peace once more. Sleep well, dear visitor, to the garden of stones and moss, an infinite, gentle possibility.